For the longest time, something always bothered me about The Princess and the Frog. Something always rubbed me the wrong way about it. I could never really decipher what it was, and it always confused me. Was it the lack of realism? Well, it can't be. I'm not a 14-year-old sad sack anymore. Was it the fact that it's padded like a mensurating fire hose? Maybe, that could be it. Is it the unnecessary villain? Well, that's possible. I certainly have seen that before. But then, after 3 years, an entire book, a crowdfunded lesson on character work, several blorbos, and an avalanche of harassment once the stalker smelled vulnerability, I finally figured it out. The main character is being unnecessarily lectured for just living her fucking life. So The Princess and the Frog is a film I have complicated feelings about. On the one hand, it has one of my favorite Disney princesses out there, but on the other hand, her story is kneecapped by a deeply misogynistic central theme. It has one of the most beautiful romances of any Disney film, but that's in spite of the story and not because of it. It has one of the most enjoyable villains Disney's ever made, who is completely unnecessary and actively brings down the main story with his presence and overcomplicates everything. It's like Disney was constantly taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back with this one, and that wouldn't be too far off because Princess and the Frog was coming right off the heels of a slump period for Disney animation. At the time Princess and the Frog released, it had been 11 years since Disney's last major Disney princess film. Disney had spent the late 90s and 2000s jogging in place with really experimental films, some of which succeeded like The Emperor's New Groove and Lilo and Stitch, and others were home on the range. Not the best time to be an animator. But hey, DreamWorks wasn't doing too good either. DreamWorks animators spent years pouring their hearts and souls to create the most beautiful and soul-capturing animation they could possibly bring to page for a fucking Bible movie, and then the animators that couldn't cut it there got sent off to make Shrek, and it sold fucking gangbusters. Just in case anyone still thinks that the animation is the most important part of an animated movie, lol. So attempts to bring animated films back from the brink of death came about in this film, an adaptation of The Frog Prince, but filtered through a roaring 20s aesthetic and stretched out to about 12 times as long. And I think that's where Princess and the Frog flounders. Because you have a good story here, but it's buried under the usual Disney tat that defined the Disney Renaissance. And in many cases, those two things are butting heads with each other. Given this was the first princess movie to be released since Mulan, it seems Disney thought the story had to be everything a Disney princess movie traditionally was during the Renaissance. So you've got an otherwise good character-focused story about expectations and relationships and work-life balance and what it means to really love someone, but because it's a Disney princess movie, it also needs to include magic and fairy tale stuff and musical numbers and talking animals and a villain, and all those things really bog down an otherwise good story. Like, I know people love him, but the story around the Shadow Man takes so many legal twists and turns that involve marrying into money, kissing what is technically a princess to break the frog curse, but then it's too late, but then it's not because apparently the Loa are all sticklers for the rules, and that's not even getting into the swamp animals, including the one that dies rather unnecessarily, and all of them have to be characterized as well, and this script is in dire need of an editor, preferably one armed with pruning shears. So the core failing of The Princess and the Frog is that underneath all the obligations, it's a story that tries and fails to teach its characters the wrong lesson. Tiana is a workaholic breaking her back in order to open a restaurant in New Orleans, largely because it was the dream of her father who tragically died before it could ever be realized. And in a rather callous turn for a Disney film, Tiana just gets absolutely bull rushed by everyone. Her friends, her boss, even her own mother devalues her efforts throughout the entire first act. Her friends because Tiana's always working and never takes any time off. Her boss because he's jaded and rolls his eyes at the idea of upward social mobility. And her mother is more preoccupied with Tiana finding love because it made her father happy and she wants the same thing for—
I want some grandkids.
Okay, scratch that. She had ulterior motives. She wants to have grandkids and wants her daughter to get on that. I mean, fair enough. There's not much time left. Tiana's already 19. Yeah, okay, no, you can wait. This is all pretty typical mom stuff, especially mothers in the 1920s. But I mean, come the fuck on. How much catty bullshit are we gonna have to listen to here? So already we see the through line for the film. Your dad didn't get his restaurant, but he had a family that he loved. But there's this subtle implication that having a family was largely what stopped him from getting his restaurant, placing a certain degree of guilt on Tiana to push even harder to get it. But the thing is, outside of working herself to no sleep, Tiana's not actually being an unreasonable person. She's not pushing some idea of never seeking out love and absorbing herself entirely in her career. Hell, she says it herself.
That's just gonna have to wait a while.
How long we talking about here?
This is actually Tiana being very responsible and considerate because she's not complicating things with a family when she's only 19 and that shit can wait. I actually like that side of Tiana because it's common for writers to sneer at the idea of women being in relationships because they think it's some kind of subversive take like, oh, she doesn't need a partner in her life. But like, most people don't need a partner, but they would probably like one. It's a hell of a lot more nuanced than making a character functionally aromantic just because you have a bug up your ass about romance, and then coincidentally leaving the fact that they're aromantic into a live stream. But ironically, the film is on the opposite end of that because the closest thing the film has for something to teach Tiana, it's waiting to get married, what are you, some kind of spinster? Not a great starting point for a film to establish your heroine as completely reasonable and then besetting her on all sides by borderline misogynistic rhetoric and expecting the audience to be on board. Almost every character in the film hammers this point into Tiana's head constantly. I know you want to have a restaurant, but have you considered marrying far too young and pumping out kids instead? I know that was on your agenda eventually, but I think it should be your top priority. And I think this is the only Disney film that does this. Usually the heroines get invested in romance either out of the blue or after eyeing a hot piece of ass, but Tiana does neither, and it's almost like she's committed some cosmic faux pas. The problem I have with this, aside from the obvious baffling misogyny, is that the story is presented as if Tiana is the one having to learn a lesson when she is ultimately vindicated. Because the two people who love her more than anything, Charlotte from the start and Naveen from the second half onward, both want Tiana to have everything she wants. The point where Naveen falls in love with Tiana is the point where he starts trying to help her achieve her dream. He was even going to marry Charlotte on the condition that Charlotte fund Tiana's restaurant, and I'm pretty sure Tiana's pride was the only thing that stopped that from happening in the first place. Everyone in the film tells Tiana she has to give up on her restaurant, find a man, and settle down, but the moment Naveen starts to actually care for her, his only thought is, wow, she should really have that restaurant. And Charlotte, who has basically wanted to marry a prince since she was a kid, completely lets Naveen out of his deal the instant she sees just how much him and Tiana care about each other. Hell, earlier in the film, Charlotte is the catalyst to Tiana getting her restaurant when she pays her enough to actually put in the down payment.
This is it. I'm getting my restaurant.
Just look at the joy on her face. Look at that. That is a beautiful sight. More of this in all movies. I can't describe just how much this warms my heart. It's utterly delightful. And this is where my complicated feelings on the film are. The selfless love on display from both of them is the truly infectious part of the film. Naveen starts falling in love with her precisely because Tiana lights up when she talks about her passion for cooking and her dream of opening her restaurant. It's that passion that makes both of them adore her so much. Almost in spite of its bafflingly misogynistic central theme, Disney managed to write one of the most delightful romances ever put to screen because Tiana is utterly cherished by Naveen from the moment he falls in love with her, and everything he does is about selflessly trying to undo the horrible mess he's gotten her into, even if he gets nothing out of it in the end.
I will find another way to get Tiana a restaurant.
Could you have the cute little tadpole?
Get the job. Maybe 2, maybe 3.
Ultimately, Naveen is the one who has to learn something about being less selfish and spoiled, while Tiana largely doesn't change at all. What I find particularly interesting about this is that it's common in het romance, especially Disney romance, for a woman to be the catalyst for a man's personal growth, but that's usually by her explicitly nurturing that side out of him like she's a surrogate mother. It's terrible and it's awful and it needs to die on the vine. But there's a version of this where instead of being an active player in that growth, the woman just inspires that growth by being her wonderful, delightful self and inspiring him to be a better person, even if she's unaware she's done it. And that is utterly adorable. I love that. It's perfect, it's cute. One really cool thing about the film is that it's the first time in a Disney film that the two leads have to actually come to an understanding before they fall in love, or the first time without kidnapping and slavery. Lily, what about Mulan? Well, no, because they actually end that film with Shang being asked to dinner for the first time, which is adorable, and I love them so huggy-muggy much. Isn't it quite what I'm talking about here. Lottie is a different story, as being a supporting character she's a lot less deep, but her and Tiana have been best friends since they were little, and unlike the others, Lottie isn't just supportive of Tiana's dreams, she puts her literal money where her mouth is when she overpays Tiana for a catering job. And while Tiana is just swamped with joy, seriously, this shot, utterly delightful, Lottie is almost as giddy as she is and even runs off cheering. And Lottie's been after Naveen for the entire film, but the moment Tiana confesses to loving him, she's just like... She's actually moved to tears by Tiana's confession, and though she ultimately fails to help them, it's telling just how much she loves Tiana that she just throws away her own desires for her. If anything, that would have been a much better through line for the film for Tiana, watching someone else throw their own dreams aside because she is just more important to them. There have been a lot of people suggesting Lottie is gay, and specifically gay for Tiana, and I can definitely see it because that kind of adoration and love is fucking primal. And this is the part of the film I actually really like, where Tiana is completely adored by these two people in different ways who both ultimately give up the things they want for her. This could be the foundation for a really good movie. The thing is, I don't think it's just a hypothetical. I think it could happen. Disney in 2009 was very married to its princess tropes, but the Disney of 2023 doesn't have that problem. Since Princess and the Frog came out, Disney has been either subverting or eschewing the typical Disney brand, and they've made films that are about characters without having to brand themselves a princess movie. They've made films that just have no villains at all, like Encanto or Moana. Arguably, Their worst films are the ones that still feel the need to shove that stuff in there, like Zootopia or Raya and the Last Dragon, both of which suffer from the same problems that plagued Princess and the Frog. Yeah, I know the death of Disney villains is getting all the 30-year-old Disney nuts really cranky, but who gives a shit what they think? Furthermore, while the live-action remakes are grating on people, it's worth remembering that the film that started all of this was one that decided it was going to be very different from its source material, as opposed to just being a shot-for-shot remake or making pithy remarks to internet nitpicks. And it was very good. It's arguably one of the best films Disney's ever made, subverting old Disney tropes in ways that are actually very clever. Despite its gloomy atmosphere, it's quite a heartfelt and positive movie. I think Disney is in a place where they could probably remake Princess and the Frog, but rather than waste time addressing the criticisms in film, they just act on it and make a better film. One that isn't swamped, haha, by a cast that is way too fucking big, a villain that doesn't need to actually be here, and a deeply misogynistic main theme. If you want a good theme for the film, it's the one Tiana already has. Tiana throughout the entire film is passively unwilling to step on anyone to get what she wants. She believes in the idea of honest and hard work, which is why there's multiple avenues to get what she wants that don't even come up. But two people in the film sacrifice what they want for her sake because they love her that much. Seeing that happen, indeed seeing that happen consecutively, would probably leave a very big impact on her. It wouldn't necessarily change her dreams, but it would certainly cause her to reprioritize a little bit. And you could do it without having to fucking browbeat her over the head for 90% of the goddamn film. Like, you just need one really impactful emotional moment to have someone sit back and think about what's really important. If you really need the Loa involved, which is fair, I mean, I like the Loa, have her be the one who is offered the bargain at the end. Get everything you want and sacrifice others to do it, but it's actually just a trick to see if the passive unwillingness to step on anyone will become an active unwillingness to step on anyone. Kind of like an episode of Star Trek where Q shows up to teach everyone a lesson in humanity. Hell, the whole movie could fit that as a framing device. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here. At the end of the day, the heart of the story is,
My dream wouldn't be complete without you in it.
I'll be honest, I don't think Disney wanted this movie to be a box office disappointment. Yeah, they were transitioning completely to 3D animation around the time this came out, but it's not like audiences are sticklers for animation styles. They like both 2D and 3D in equal measure. People often point out how Disney sabotaged Treasure Planet, but that was a movie Disney was obligated to make as part of an agreement, and they never really cared about it, so its success was kind of irrelevant anyway. Disney could have released this, have it sell gangbusters, and then transition entirely to 3D, and the only people who would have complained are the technology bad hipsters who wasted their money on that hullabaloo scam. Disney promoted this film quite a bit because they wanted it to bring them back from the slump the 2000s had been. The problems were the film having a spirograph plot and releasing the same day as James Cameron's colonialist Funland, which, in all fairness, nobody really expected that to be the big moneymaker. I don't know a single person who doesn't like this movie, even if that comes with the asterisk of, but it's a fucking mess. Even most of my criticisms are largely about things that distract from the fun part of watching Tiana be utterly cherished by everyone in the main cast. Lily, are you suggesting you would actually want a story of someone just being smothered in love and affection for 120 minutes? What do you mean, would I? I've written that book. Inject that shit straight into my fucking veins, bitch. Look, I'm a child abuse, CSA, and domestic abuse survivor, which means I like my romance soft and reassuring and cute and loving and all that gay shit. I'm not really down for what some people call spicy romance, because I've had that in real life and it sucks and makes you want to kill yourself. And The Princess and the Frog is the closest we've actually gotten to the kind of romance I love the most. The uncomplicated joy of seeing the person you love light up as they talk about their passions and thinking, wow, she should really just have it all. I'd like to see a version of this movie that's just that part, and none of the other bullshit. I know it's probably gonna ruffle some feathers that I'm suggesting that the Shadow Man should be removed from the story entirely because I like villains is my generation's own I'm not like other girls, but he really is just completely unnecessary and here entirely out of obligation. Something that became more and more evident until Disney finally wised up and realized, wait, we could just make a normal movie. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Bye!